Hi, this is Marta from Ruby Soup for Spell Juice, and today I am bringing you a Top 5 Wednesday video. Top 5 Wednesday is a Goodreads group run by Sam from Thoughts on Thomas. I will leave her channel as well as the Goodreads group down below, so you can check out information about that if you are interested. And today I wanted to talk about my favorite retellings. These are basically books that are based around previous works or legends, and they are like either modernizing them or doing a new spin on these tales. And not all of these are books, but they are all kind of bookish. So let's get started. Now at number 5, I have to recommend Ran, directed by Kurosawa. This is a classic Japanese film that is based on King Lear. And Kurosawa has taken the play of King Lear and redone it to be about samurais and about a aging samurai patriarch who is kind of like also a king, and he wants to divide up his kingdom with his 3 sons. And then it basically takes off from there. And it's almost like a by-the-book retelling, only that the 3 daughters are now 3 sons. And I should also warn that in case people don't like gore or violence, this movie is really a bloodbath. It is one of the bloodiest movies that Kurosawa has done. But it is really engaging, and the message that this movie has is really good. It's actually about pride and about how conflict tears things apart, while trying to understand each other would be a better path to peace. As well as it also deals with bad things that you have done in the past kind of catching up with you. And there's actually a lot of really thoughtful stuff in this very gory film. Now coming in number 4 is a picture book written for children, and that is The Canine Kalevala by Mauri Kunnas. Now the Kalevala, for those who don't know, is a classic book written in the 19th century by Elias Lönnrot, and it is basically Finland's national epic. It is based on Finnish folklore with a lot of Elias Lönnrot's own writings, and it's a big debate in Finland, like how much did he rework things and how much is actually the stuff that he heard traveling around Finland getting all these legends. But I'll link that stuff below if you are interested. And The Canine Kalevala is a kid's version of these tales, with the twist that instead of them all being humans, then they are now dogs, cats, and wolves. And while that could be like a recipe for disaster, Mauri Kunnas is such a talented writer that he actually remains very respectful to the source material while also poking fun at certain things. And a lot of the animals that he picks for the different characters in its own way make a lot of sense. Like, for instance, there's like this one family up in the north that are supposed to be like more powerful, and they're kind of like witches, and they're shown as wolves compared to the more depowered people that are depicted as dogs. And I thought that was an interesting way of how to talk about how the power struggle works there. And there's also one character who he's the womanizer, and he's very rash, and he kind of just goes in and does things. And he also likes to have a lot of attention and considers himself like the greatest guy of all time. And he's made into a cat. And, you know, if you know anything about cats, that really makes sense. It's really spot on. It's such a good introduction for Finnish children or Sweden-Finn children to learn about their folklore. And it most certainly was my introduction to the Kalevala. So, and the Kalevala means a lot to me personally. And due to those reasons, then this retelling has a very special place in my heart. And now coming in number 3 is a classic short story collection called The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Angela Carter was kind of like a magical realist, absurdist feminist author in England, and she's written a lot of books. She's perhaps more known for The Magic Toy Shop as well as Nights at the Circus. But in my opinion, this short story collection is her magnum opus. They're all retellings of Grimm fairy tales. It's retellings of Red Riding Hood, it's retellings of Beauty and the Beast, it's retellings of Puss in Boots. There's also, like, the very first short story is a retelling of Bluebeard. And they all kind of like have a very feminist twist to them. And also for people that might not want to read about that kind of stuff, I'll give out a warning that all of these stories are really, really sexual. Even if they don't describe sex per se, then there is like this very heavy sexual tone throughout most of the stories. And what I like about these short stories is that they're all like really, like, some of them are really disturbing, and then some of them are more like funny, and then some of them are, for instance, the very first story of the Bluebeard, then that one's like a twist on like that instead of a man coming in saving the day, then it's the main character's mother who comes and saves the day. So she plays around with all these tropes about fairy tales really, really well. And while I guess people would say that that's kind of done to death nowadays, then I would actually like to say that The Bloody Chamber and other stories, well, first, like, the language is really, really beautiful, but also these stories actually came out during the 80s or 70s. I'll put the date down below because I'm not quite sure, but these short stories actually came way, way before all these feminist retellings of fairy tales was the fashion. So Angela Carter was like a pioneer when it came to retelling, and just for that I just adore this collection. Now coming in on number 4 is another feminist retelling, but this time of a ancient Greek work, The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. This is basically a parallel novel to the Odysseus, where instead of following Odysseus, we are following his wife Penelope, and we are also following her handmaids that in the original book, they're all hanged at the end of the book. And this one is trying to figure out what exactly was going on in Penelopiad's head, and were the maids really complicit in what Odysseus accused them of being complicit in. And this book is actually quite interesting in that it's incredibly sad, but it's also really, really funny. Like, most of Penelope's dialogue is really sardonic and really ironic, and she kind of makes like a lot of really catty but really funny commentaries about everyone around her, and she's actually really hilarious. And then there are chapters that are from the maid's point of view, and they're talking from the grave, and they speak like a chorus, like, you know, in ancient Greece they used to have a chorus in their plays, and the maids do these choruses in poetry where they talk about their lives and they talk about this grave injustice that they felt happened to them and the enormous fury that they have. And a thing that's really interesting about this book is that while it is very funny and it pokes a lot of fun at a lot of things and it's very comical in a lot of ways, it also deals with a lot of really heavy stuff. Like, there's no sugarcoating about like how women were treated back in this time. There's like the maids, for instance, they're repeatedly like raped and mistreated by a lot of the suitors that are there trying to convince Penelope to marry them. And then the way the suitors even treat Penelope is like very like toxic masculinity. And then even Odysseus, when he comes home, then the way he kills all the suitors is really bloody and gory. And this book is actually really interesting in that this totally like, I mean, it kind of is a homage to the original work, but it also deconstructs all of our very romantic ideas about about these times and about these stories, and it really is clever. And I like how Margaret Atwood is able to talk about things that are really, really horrible in such honesty, but also in such funny ways. So, I mean, this book, like how I remember it, it is a really comical read, but it's also deeply disturbing, and it's just amazing how those two things are blended together. So, highly recommend. This is perhaps like, well, it's not her best work, but this is definitely in Atwood's top 5 best works. And now, the last recommendation that I'm going to be doing for a retelling is a little bit different. It is a novel, and it is a retelling of Candid by Voltaire. Candid by Voltaire was a 18th century satirical work where Voltaire was making fun of a philosopher who claimed that the world already is good enough, because this is like he claimed that the world that we have is the best of possible worlds, because God would not give us a imperfect world. And then Voltaire wrote this response novel where he was basically just spilling tea on this philosopher's ideas by showing a young man who's very idealistic, who then travels the world, and all sorts of really horrible things happen to him, while his friend keeps telling him, like, no, but this is the best of possible worlds, and don't complain, we actually are in the best possible worlds, I can prove it to you, while things get worse and worse. And what I'm going to recommend is A Cool Million by Nathaniel West. Nathaniel West was an American author who died in 1940. He wrote 3 short novels: Miss Lonely Hearts, The Day of the Locust, and A Cool Million. And A Cool Million was published in 1934. And it basically follows a young man who comes from a poor family, but he's told that if you work hard and if you just, aim for your dreams, then things will work out for you and you can still make it. And then when this young man goes out there and tries to fulfill his longing to escape poverty, then things just get worse and worse and worse. He ends up going to prison, and he ends up losing all of his teeth, and he ends up getting more and more poor, and all these horrible things happen to him, while people keep telling him to not lose hope in the American dream. And so it's basically the same premise of Candid, but instead of doing satire over a philosopher, this is a satire over the idea of the American dream. And let me tell you, A Cool Million is one of the funniest books that I have ever read. It just, almost every sentence made me laugh, and they were just so many moments that were just so totally crazy and weird and out there. There's a lot of things in here that still resonate today, like the ridiculous things that we expect people to overcome and to just push through, and to, I guess as people say, like, pull yourself by the bootstraps. This still resonates today, and that even makes it even more fantastic that Nathaniel West was able to talk about something that was so real at such a early time. And I think it's a really underrated book. I would actually say that more people should pick up A Cool Million and give it a read, because it's so much worth your time. Now, I will give out one small warning. One weird sentence in here when it comes to a POC character that's a little bit odd and a bit offensive, but I don't think that we're supposed to take that at face value. I think it's actually a sarcastic comment that's actually making fun of this idea, but still, viewer caution. So, those were my favorite retellings. Do you guys have any favorite retellings you would like to share? Comment down below. I would love to get some recommendations. If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye!